Mira, you just moved. How was it? And
How
I'll
did
be like,
that go?
a shit show.
Welcome to Grief Chats with Dana and Mira, where we talk candidly about all things grief and widowhood. Grief is hard. Let's talk about it.
Is there any widow that's like, I just moved and it was amazing and went perfectly and it was so easy. No big deal.
No. I mean, I don't think so.
Sometimes you just need to fucking move out of the apartment. Like sometimes you just need to like get the fuck out.
That's done.
You know, like I guess we should start.
Okay. Yeah, let's start. Hi everyone. Hi Mira.
Hi.
Welcome to Grief Chats episode 6. Never know what episode.
I think it's
Today we're going to talk about transitions and specifically moving kind of as our main topic because Mira, you are just finishing. You've been living this for the last couple of weeks and kind of for the last couple months, you've been going through this transition. And so we're going to talk about what comes up with that when you pack up your stuff, when you pack up your partner's stuff, kind of everything that's wrapped up into that major life transition. So we're going to start, Mira, with you because this is so fresh and you are in it and coming out of it. And I would just love to kind of hear a little bit about why you decided to move. Both of us, for everyone watching, we both did move out of the homes that we had with our spouses. And not everyone does that. So we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences and just some of the reasons maybe that people do and then do not move. So we'll just start with you and kind of what made that decision for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think we both moved around the same time in our grief as well, right? Around the 2-year mark.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point.
That's interesting too, because people do it at all different phases in the grief process, right? So I think I knew pretty much from when Brian died that I would eventually move out of our place. For me, I mean, it wasn't a home we owned. It was a home we were renting. I didn't have a super strong connection to it. We'd only moved in a year before he got sick. So we didn't have super strong ties. The neighborhood I liked, but I was never crazy about. I didn't necessarily feel like we had like entrenched ourselves in the community. And yeah, I just kind of knew almost immediately, like eventually I will leave this place.
Yeah.
It was almost like a visceral feeling. Like sometimes the trauma, we had some pretty intense trauma memories with Brian's illness. I guess probably most people that cared for a spouse with cancer do as well. But for us, I think especially because Brian's cancer was so aggressive, there were a lot of very scary things that happened because it was so fast that nobody really even knew. Like we were always like 10 steps behind it.
Yeah.
And so there were some very triggering, really traumatic moments that happened for me in that house. And I think that's a really big part of it for me. Like, they really took over the memories that I had from the previous year that we had lived there with him when he was healthy. Like, I really don't have a ton of really strong memories from that year. But I even, like, when we moved out eventually, and I went back and went into the bathroom after we'd moved everything out, like, I was even then like just hit with such a strong memory of like Brian in the shower when he was really sick. That was super triggering to me. And I was like, okay, this is like a reminder why I left this fucking apartment. Like, this is why I needed to do this. Like, it was really getting to me. Those triggers were really getting to me and they weren't letting up. And I think to be fair, that part of that reason is because it's kind of like a chicken egg thing. Like, because I didn't love being in that apartment, I spent a lot of time like staying with Brian's mom and staying at my family cottage and staying in California and doing all this traveling because I didn't love being in the apartment. But then it's almost like the more time you spend away and then you come back, I find the triggers were always stronger. Like if we'd been away for a month and then we came back to the apartment, I would be like hit with so much grief, like just coming back to that space again. So I think if you kind of just like hunker down and stay, maybe you kind of integrate some of those.
Yeah, you had to get used to it a little bit more maybe.
Yeah. So
how long were you gone before you moved? Because I know you were with Brian's mom.
Yeah. So we went out there just before Christmas.
Okay.
And we've been really, really, really careful with COVID because both Brian's mom and my dad are very high risk. Um, and my mom is too, to a certain extent because of her age, but particularly those two are like very high risk. So we've been super careful. So like once we went out there, like I was tested and then we went out there, and then it's like a 4-hour drive north of Toronto. And then once we got there, there was a stay-at-home order that was issued, and we just, the levels were so much lower there, and we kind of hunkered down with her for a while. But it's hard to know how much of that was because of COVID and how much
Right.
was because of like it's all intermingled now. So like because of that, we stayed basically all of the end of December, all of January, and then February 1st comes and we're like still there. And I'm like, I've been home in like 6 weeks at this point. And I've been thinking a lot about the apartment and how we also live in a really expensive city, so I'm paying so much in rent. And it just got super stressful for me. I'm like, we're not even there. And I'm like, I know I want to eventually move, and like maybe we should just do it. And so February 1st hit and I gave notice, and then we stayed another month until the end of February. So we were there for like 2.5 months total. And then we went home for like 3 weeks and I packed. So I hadn't really been living there in a while when I went back to pack it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a long time to be out of your apartment and to come back. And especially when you're just kind of processing everything anyway. Like, I know you are a person that is processing everything without being there, and then to walk into this physical space of just how much comes up after 3 months, essentially, of not being in there. And then walking in knowing you're packing up to leave. Like, and the emotional toll that adds on top.
Oh my God. That first night we got back and I was like, holy hell, what have I done? Like, I was so freaked out. I was like, why did I make this decision? Like, I always knew I eventually wanted to do it, but I just kept thinking, I'm not ready yet. It's going to be too hard. I can't handle it. I knew it was going to be really, really difficult. And I think for us, it's also, it's tied in with the fact that we live in a city that's really unaffordable. So once you find a good apartment, and this was like a really nice apartment, like it was beautiful. It was like such a steal for Toronto, like a crazy, crazy steal for Toronto. And that's why we took it when it was offered to us. A friend offered it to us and we were like, oh my God, this is like way too good a deal to not, like, it was a 3-bedroom, like no one has a 3-bedroom. Like, it's just, Toronto's nuts. So I think that's what made it a lot harder to give up, was I was like, I am not only giving up this apartment, but potentially this entire city.
Yeah.
And my entire family and so many of our friends. And the city that I just like always thought I would raise Davida in, because it's the city that I grew up in. Like, it's not only like the home I lived in with Brian, it's like I have roots there that go back so far. And I love Toronto. It's an amazing city. It's home. It's like I know it, like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
And that's really comforting. And I don't know if I can afford. So for those of you who don't know, I actually don't have a home right now.
But I was going to say, fill everyone in, because not everyone knows that you were out of Toronto and you're still in this gray space. And
I don't know where I'm living. So basically I made this decision and I was like, okay, I need to stop paying this money. I need to stop having this empty apartment that I know I want to eventually let go of. Like, I'm just going to do this. I have to be brave. I know I want to, so I'm just going to do it. I'm never going to feel ready, so I'm just going to go for it and do it. And then I will figure it out. And so I decided that was a big enough thing for me at one time. Like, I like to compartmentalize things. So I was like, I'll do that, and then I'll think about where we're moving. Like, the two together felt too stressful. So I mean, I guess I could have looked for a place first. But anyways, I just decided what felt right was that I wanted out, and I wanted to be free of it, and I wanted to cut those ties. So
I think there is so much there is so much beauty to that, and it is easier instead of dealing with all of it, of like cutting the ties, saying goodbye, walking away from this home you had with your late husband, and then also trying to figure out what's next. Like, I feel like, how do you wrap your mind around all of that at once? So I think being like, I'm going to do one, I'm going to cut the ties and walk away, and then figure out the next. Like, I don't know how you do that together.
Well, you kind of did. Tell people your story. That's well, because yeah, your story is awesome. Your story is like, I want that to happen to me.
Well, I think as a planner, it's, there's some similarities, but yeah, it felt very rushed and unplanned. And so I lived in a loft that Brad and I owned in Detroit, and we had lived there for 4 years, I think, together before he got sick. So, and it was our home. Like, we loved this place. Similar to like Detroit was exploding with real estate. We found this foreclosure and this amazing building on the water, and it was just like magic. And we had no business affording to live in this building, in this space, and like just worked in our favor. And even that, with like, as a foreclosure, we were just two poor young professionals being like, we can't really afford this, but made it work and just got so lucky. So it was our home. It was a place that I just loved. And when Brad died, the loft was in his name because when we purchased it, I had just gone through cancer treatment and I had an outstanding medical bill that had gone to a debt collector because I didn't pay. It was for like an ambulance ride or something. And at the time we were like, my credit is not quite as good, and it was still fine. Like, it was like a $700 bill or something, and it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
But we were just, we'll just put it in Brad's name because his credit is stellar, and we never thought about it again or why like that even mattered. And so when Brad died, the loft became basically the estate. Like, it was like the only asset we had, and so that like became the property of the estate, and I had to go through this whole process to get it in my name. And part of that was I owned my own business and didn't have consistent regular income. So to get the loft into my name, I had to qualify again for the mortgage on my own. So I had to stop my styling. I was a stylist, personal stylist for women, and take a full-time desk 9-to-5 job. So it was like all these transitions were happening just to get the loft even in my name. And I thought I would never leave. Like, I was not like you, where it's like, I was like, I am here. I am in this loft. I'm in Detroit. Like, this is my home. And I remember people had asked me, like, at the memorial service. So like immediately multiple people had asked me if I was going to stay in Detroit. And I remember being so offended by it, of like, I've lived here for over a decade. Like, I'm not just some girl that followed a boy, which is what I did, but like 2 days ago, and now I'm going to go back home. I'm like, we've built a life here. Like, all our friends are here. And I was just like, why would I leave? And I'm like, still curious if like people knew something I didn't, or knew like how hard it would be. And in my mind, then I was just like, this is home. Like, I'm never leaving this place. But I spent a year, and similar to you, I kind of like avoided, and I was traveling and like wasn't home a lot, like in the first 6 months. And then started this job, and for a year it was just kind of miserable in my life, like grieving and feeling disconnected from my home, from my place, from my friends. And like, this feeling was so heavy of just feeling like nothing felt familiar, like even within my home. And there were a lot of triggers. Brad also had a pretty traumatic decline with his cancer diagnosis, and was very fast. So there were a lot of things in our home that did really start to like affect. And even though we had 4 years before, there were so many, that's what I was seeing, like these horrible moments. And so I started just to kind of think about like this other version of this life. Like, I didn't tell anyone. I wasn't like, I'm going to leave. I started a Pinterest board of like whatever. And I think I called it New Normal, because I was like, I have to imagine something that is different than what I'm currently going through and feeling, because I just felt like I couldn't survive. Like, I couldn't live that way indefinitely. And so I started to play with this idea, and like everything I wanted was like more nature and more quiet and water and, just this simpler life. And I slowly started to like look on Zillow and look at these places and, kind of these remote lake villages and little towns in northern Michigan, and daydream about like, this totally different life than I ever thought I'd have, and certainly never imagined with Brad. And one day I was on Zillow and I found this little house on this tiny little lake in the very tip of northern Michigan. And I was just like, there was something in me where I was like, I have to go see this house. And it was like one of the few things that was in my budget and on a little lake. And I called off work, like called in sick, and drove up the next morning and saw the house and signed the lease on the spot and was like, holy fuck. Like, I mean, my sister, I think, knew I was thinking about it, and maybe a couple close friends of like daydreaming, but it was not like an intentional plan. Like, I'm going to figure out how to survive outside of the city that I know and love, and with support that I have, and with a job that I have. And so for me, it was driving back down for this 4-hour drive back to Detroit and being like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I have a job I have to quit now. I have like a loft that I have to figure out what to do with. Was just a holy shit moment.
Yeah. Wow.
But unlike you, so I've been able to rent out my loft. So I didn't have that same, like, it still felt horrible going in and packing up everything and sitting in that loft and not knowing when the next time I would go in, like, felt horrible. But there was a little bit of comfort in my situation of like, I still own this. Like, someone is living here, but at some point I could go back. And frankly, I'm not sure if I can afford to go back on my own, but like, it's some possible like realm in my existence.
Yeah, at a different point when you have more money or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I become wildly successful.
Yeah. So it's not like that same, like, I may never live in this city again.
Right.
Like, yeah. Because I think for me, that's been the hardest part. Since I did the move, which was 3 weeks ago, maybe? I think it was about 3 weeks ago. Since I did the move, that's the thing that I've really been grieving most. Like, I feel confident that apartment, I did not need to be in that apartment.
Yeah.
I feel very confident about that. But what I'm not confident about, and I think that's why I held on to it, was I was like, this is my ticket to being in the city. And am I ready to give up the city? And maybe if I just like keep going for a few years, it'll get easier. And living in this apartment we'll redefine it. We only lived here, like, I thought when we lived longer there without him than with him, it would be easier. No, not at all. Like, it was, so I think that's sort of my thing now, is I'm like, that's the thing I'm grieving. Like, cause I'm actually in Toronto right now because I came back just, for 48 hours to get my summer tires on. And being here right now, this is my first time being back since knowing, like, I don't have a home here.
Yeah.
And that what I think I'm realizing is, like, my grief is more for the city than for the apartment. And I'm like definitely grieving the city. Like, that's the bigger thing for me. Like, even just driving in, I was like sobbing. And I didn't want to go to that apartment. Like, I was just like, get me as far away. Yeah. I actually had to go there to pick up my new health card that was mailed there. And even being on the front porch, I was like, no, I don't want to, no. Like, I don't want to.
Which is kind of a great thing to know, that it's actually not about that space. And that it is about the city, and that there is, maybe for you too, there is some time where, you know, you do come back, but you're letting go of the security of that. Like, that apartment guaranteed you access to the city that you love.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like the city combined with the support. So I know, we polled people on like the reasons that they moved or the reasons that they didn't move. And I know support systems was a really big reason for on both sides. Like, people stayed because of support or left because of support. Yeah. And I think that just shows like how important support is when you go through something like this. Like, I'm just like, holy shit, like, moving somewhere where I have zero support and like a zero network is so much scarier now for multiple reasons. Like, also because I don't have a partner. Like, I think those types of moves are like so much easier when you have a partner.
Yeah, because you always have your person to be like, we'll get through this together, and we'll be our own friends until we make friends. And
yeah. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's like couples always look for
mom.
What's that?
And you're a mom, so it's like you're like actual support with help for your daughter is
Oh,
like
exactly.
you're walking away from that.
Like, I'm just like, oh, wow. So I would only be able to do anything if I paid someone to watch my kid. Like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of widows deal with that, but like, I haven't had to deal with that ever. And, then that's tied into like money and all this other stuff that just feels, it's all connected, right? It's all connected. Um, yeah. Anyways, before we started recording, Dana and I were talking, and I was just like, how is it still so hard? Like, how is it still so hard at 2 years? I'm just like, I thought it would be easier by now. I thought that there would be like some sort of, I don't know, things would have started to ease a little bit, but I feel like things have gotten harder.
I
Not,
wonder, like, now that I'm thinking about it, we just talked about this. I wonder if people that do like the majority of these transitions, like with early, like maybe within the first year, or people that don't make these transitions at all, that kind of stay,
yeah,
if it feels like I think, and this is what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, that like you are going through so much right now, it's inevitable that you're feeling like these major, major grief waves. And so I wonder, like, I don't know, we were talking about the timeline, and if you just kind of like knock it all out, like if you get rid of the stuff, if you move, if you like do all the quit your job, if you do it right away, which they tell you not to do, like if
no,
you kind
I
of just, like,
know,
go through it and deal with
totally.
it, and then all you're doing is focusing on like healing in your sadness and not like because now it's like every major transition is knocking you back all over again.
100%. I
And
keep,
that's what you're doing right now. Like you're in
yes, yeah. Like, I feel like in the first year, I was brave. I was like, I knew, I just followed, like, my body was like telling me what to do. Like, it was just, my intuition was so good. I feel like I was fearless. Like, I was running on like adrenaline and all these things. And, yeah, like all of these things that are happening now for me, like things are changing with my job, things are changing with my home. I have like, different sorts of like personal relationships in my life are, new hard things are coming up. Like, all of this stuff is coming up right now. And yeah, part of me wonders if like I should have just done, I knew I wanted to do all these things right away. Like, I knew
Mhm.
these changes were inevitable. I was just like scared to make them because I kept thinking I would change my mind,
Yeah.
but those intuition, I think they stay.
Right. And I think you're still like, it's just so interesting hearing you talk about how brave and fearless you were in the first year. And we've talked privately about this, like that feeling that you have that I'm curious if other people also felt that way, where it's like you can kind of, you had this power to do anything. But
Yeah.
I watch you now and what you're doing, and I'm like, you're so fucking brave and fearless. And maybe you're feeling more now in like a different way. And there's a different thought process, like coming out of the grief fog a little bit and
Yeah.
being like more aware of it than like that brave. I think it was kind of this like fog a little bit in the first year of like and a zero fucks attitude.
Yes.
And now it's like you're being more thoughtful, so maybe it feels scarier and like
Yeah.
you're full of fear. But it's like I'm sure anyone that has been watching you and following you and reading your words is like, holy shit, she's doing it, like, and admiring all the things you're doing.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And everyone comment. Tell Mira.
Yeah.
Like none of it's easy.
I know. I
The
know.
easy thing is to be afraid and to stay because of it, like,
Yeah.
and even that's not easy. Taking the leap and doing something into the unknown is
It's true. It's true.
you
David and I were
work on.
talking about this the other day. I don't know why, but she was asking me like what fear is and what courage is or something like that. And I was like, because she was like, they're opposites. Oh, that's it. Because we were talking about opposites. And she was like, fear and courage are opposites. And I was like, not really. They're not really opposites. Like, I don't think so, Dee. And she was like arguing with me. She was like, no, they are. And I was like, no, they're not. Like, courage is when you're scared and you admit you're scared and you still do it.
Right.
Right? Like,
Did she register that? Like,
oh, because she was kind of, her eyes got kind of like wide.
right, it's not courageous if you're like, this is easy. I mean,
You're not
we need Brene Brown to talk to her because isn't she the one that said like it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Like I think that she was one of the first that said that. And so it's like, yeah, like the fear has to exist.
Yeah.
The courageous action.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to be brave.
You are being brave. Like, you really are,
Thank you.
even if
I'm
you're afraid.
Yeah. I keep hoping that something like what happened to you will happen to me, where I'll just like find this, like even when you were talking, I was like, it's gonna happen to me. Like I'm gonna just like get an email and it's gonna be the perfect place and then I'm gonna go and just like do it in one day. But like we'll
But
see.
I also like, do you know how batshit crazy that is in real life? Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. And it wasn't easy. And it, like, now
Yeah.
2 years later, it's very easy to be like, and it worked out.
Good
But
story.
I
Yeah.
left everyone I knew to
Yeah.
live in an area with, like, I had to plow my driveway to get out. And I was like, I don't know how to plow a driveway. Like, Mia, there were the snow plow, like, in the middle of the winter to, like, leave my house to go to the grocery. Like, it was such a different way of life that I was unprepared for. And it could have broken me 100 different times.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you just don't know. And even the things that don't work out, I feel like I have that perspective now of like being like, and it worked because I survived it. But in it every day felt hard. Every day felt hard and lonely. And then there were times where I was like, and this is where I'm supposed to be. But then I also felt lonely and questioned and,
Yeah.
so
I was literally just about to ask you, did you feel lonely? Because I think that's my biggest fear in moving out of Toronto is that I will be very lonely.
yeah, I mean, I was very lonely, but I also was very lonely in my life with
Yeah.
all my friends. And I think that was like getting to the realization of like, I'm no longer, even when I was showing up, it was like internally, I just felt so stuck and alone that it
Yeah.
was like, I felt like I had to leave to like figure that out in
Yeah.
order to be a better friend, in order to let my friends back in. Like, it just kind of felt like I didn't have a choice, at least for me, and how to handle it. So, and
That
yeah,
was
it was lonely, but it was lonely anyway.
It's true. It's true. That's such a good point. That's actually so helpful. So
Yeah, I
helpful.
mean, you get it. You get that feeling.
Yeah. Yes, I totally get that feeling. I
Right.
totally get that feeling. I think it's just that like loneliness isn't a feeling I'm very accustomed to. I've never really felt lonely. Like I was really sort of like, yeah, I feel like I've always just like had a really good solid group of friends and I've always had, my sister and I have always been really close and I've always had it just seems like and then in grief I became so insular that I always felt more like I was like feeling guilty that I was needing so much time to myself and felt feeling bad that I wasn't able to socialize the way that I was before. But I've never felt, even in my grief so far, like the loneliness that I'm starting to feel now, that I think time is passing and people are kind of moving forward with their life and things are changing and there's sort of like a grace that you're awarded at the beginning that does ease, even with me screaming about like grief literacy, like it still eases. And you
Yeah.
can tell in like subtle and obvious ways that people are just sort of like not as affected by Brian's death anymore as I am.
Yeah.
Like it still feels like really hard,
Yeah.
really, really, really hard. So, anyways, all to say that I think I don't even know where I was going with that, but like,
Well, I also wonder, like the last year's been with COVID, it's like I think everyone's felt lonely. Like I think that's reshaped like so many people's perspective on like your surrounding and the space that you're in and how we connect to people. And I
yeah,
think maybe more than ever, it's like maybe that's part of why it's hard to leave your support system because you've kind of
totally.
been on your own in a lot of ways anyway, or isolated in certain ways. And
It's
then
true.
also maybe that'll help make it easier because you can do it. You can still be
Yeah.
connected to the people that are there and that help you in really new and creative ways that, God, I hope we don't have to do forever because I'm tired of staring at the screen.
Oh, I know, me too.
But, it's like so much even in the last year of like your second year in grief and everything that comes with that, and then a pandemic and everything you've learned and gone through on
Yeah,
top of like there's so much that
it's
just has
true.
shown like what you're capable of.
Yeah, yeah. I thought of another question for you that I was wondering about this, and I think maybe a lot of other people would too, because when I when I put up a story maybe like a week or two ago, and I polled people about whether any widows had moved from the city to the country, because I feel like that is a a thought that a lot of people have, because grief and nature are so connected, right? And a lot of time nature is like the most helpful thing for people when they're in profound grief. So I feel like this is like a common move people consider. And so I had asked people who had done it, like, for their opinions, and there's a lot of people like considering it, or who have done it. And one thing, because I know, like, for a lot of widows, you know, the thought of eventually being in another relationship, or, you know, having another partner, like, comes into our brains. And I think a lot of people wonder about that. Like, if I move to the country and I'm living this like solitary life with my grief and all of that, like, will I ever meet somebody? So I thought maybe we could ask you about your experience with that part of it.
Yeah, I definitely. So it's interesting because when I first moved, and I met this woman who was not, I think she'd been divorced, and she's now a friend of mine, but at the time I didn't know a lot of her story. And she talked about the same thing. So I think a lot of people, when it's like you move from a city and you move to a remote rural area, of like, you're leaving behind more of a chance to meet a partner, like just by numbers alone. And then adding like widowhood and grief and stuff. I'm not sure how much I was aware of it when I left, because I think at that time it just wasn't something I was fully processing or ready for. Certainly when I was there though, and, you know, started doing a little bit of like the online dating briefly and all of this stuff, I was like, I'm never going to find someone. Like, this is part of, and then when I did date it, I really only dated long distance. So it is something where it is different. It is an effort. It is, you know, there's so many movies now on Netflix and things that are all about these widows that like go to the country and fall in love with like the local bartender. And like, I've seen so many, and it's like the script is down. I was like, this is not what happens. Moving to the country does not mean you fall in love with like the rugged, like, farmer across the street. Like,
that's amazing. I totally know what movie you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So many, like,
that's true.
Like 4 or 5 in the last
you're right.
month. I'm like, who is writing this narrative? So you know, good on you if that happens. But I was like, this was not my experience.
Oh my God. I totally want that to happen to me.
I mean, I hope it does. That'd be amazing.
I want that movie to be my reality.
I want that movie to be everyone's life. Like, everyone that's like a widow that's going through it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. But like, you figured it out with long distance, and that's a good point. Like, you can, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think I'm also, it's like, and I think you can relate to this a little bit of relationships look different. You're different, what you expect, what you need. Like, my independence felt like so important to me, like, and it still does. And I don't know if it's to like prove I can do it, or because I've spent the last couple of years proving that I can do it alone. Like, I'm afraid to give that up. Maybe it's trauma to fully let someone else in, but it's like, I think in the beginning, especially, there was a lot of like the safety of dating someone that wasn't there, you know?
I totally get that. Yeah.
And getting to just still live my life and then have this person over here. And so, you know, trying to integrate that now is, you know, that's a new thing that I'm trying to figure out. And, you know, that looks a little bit different, but certainly early, I needed that space.
Yeah, I totally understand that as well, for sure. Like, and because grief becomes this whole part of the equation too. And it's like, for me at least, like, I feel up until now, and maybe that'll shift now, but up until now at the 2-year mark, I felt like I just, like, I feel, I need so much space for my grief, like, to, you know, like, otherwise it just, like, I don't know why, but I just need this space where I can just like be in my grief. And I think that's been not that we're like talking about dating again, but I think that's been a big reason that it hasn't been possible for me yet. Is I'm just like, I wouldn't have enough time for myself.
I mean, I still worry about that even now, and it's something that with my current partner, like, talk a lot about. And trying to write a book and a memoir and all of this stuff and being like, I have to have space for this. Like, and it means going back and reliving these moments that are really difficult and like being back in it and needing to be supported with the person I'm dating in that really hard space of being like, this is like, I don't want to regret not doing this. I don't want to die. Like, this is Brad wanted to write a memoir, like, and he didn't get the chance. And so it's like, that haunts me, like this idea of having this goal and having anything or anyone like not fully understand it. I know you get that like with the writing and like wanting to put that out there. And so I think there is some truth to that of like the idea of like making space for somebody else, which I think is so beautiful and wonderful. And I think if the right person comes around, like you'll figure out how to make space for both, but it does require boundaries and saying like, yeah, this is really important and I need you to support this, even on days when I'd rather not, like, because it's really important that I do it.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's honestly, that's why I moved, because I wanted to write the book. That was like a big reason where I was like, I'll be lonely. I want to go write this book. And I didn't. Now we're 2 years later from moving. And part of that is, if you've been following me and know my dad moved in and I took care of him and life got fucking crazy again. But now here I'm like really trying to hunker down and life looks very different. But
yeah.
I think that's part of the reason people move too is your goals and what you want shift.
Yes, for sure. Why don't we go over the reasons that people gave us for why they moved?
Yeah, so we got a lot and I don't think I shared them. So I can share them after we share this back on Instagram again. But it was really interesting because I kind of just like gathered all the reasons and the top 3 like most common reasons were the same for why people moved and then why they decided to stay. So it was financial. So the fact that either they had to move. So like for me, I couldn't really afford realistically to live in my place. And so they moved for financial reasons or because it was cheaper to stay and the market is crazy and COVID or, whatever else. So financials were a big reason. Support, as you had mentioned, either moving close. A lot of people said that they moved back home, like moved back in with their parents for support, or to be closer to family again after their partner died. Or they stayed because they had their whole support system. They had their schools for their kids. They had all their friends and support system. And then the last was the memories. And so again, for both, like people felt like their home and the memories with their partner, like kept them there and tied them and connected them to their partner. And other people, I think like you and me also felt like the memories and some of the trauma of those memories were a little bit too overwhelming. So I just thought it was so fascinating that the reasons that people did both were the same. And there were all kinds of other reasons, like individual reasons that we do not have time to talk about. But I just kind of like that just felt so weird and interesting and strange. And I just kind of loved it. And I don't know why.
You were cool. Like,
yeah. But these are the driving factors, and some are just really realistic and logistic and others are very emotional, but it's kind of the same as to whether or not you decide to go or stay.
Yeah. I wonder if more people move because of practical or emotional reasons. I guess it's hard to like tease those apart sometimes, like because both are it's not black and white, right? Both are sort of like all intermingled. Like you can, because support can be helpful, but also sometimes hard, and sometimes there can be support in various places and it's like what support is better, and then there's stories that are all like good and bad, and I mean it's all connected in grief anyways, right? Like some people even without trauma memories, like I know still find it hard to live in the space just because even the good memories are painful.
Like sometimes unbearable.
It's all connected, right?
Right. You have these memories that you'll never have. You have with this person again. And that's almost sometimes just as hard, if not harder at times than the trauma ones.
I think another thing for me, like when I'm just thinking of like what it was for me, it was definitely those, it was mostly the trauma memories for me, but then also the financial piece as well. But also for me, it was like, because I just feel like I have this, my identity is changing so much on such a profound level. And I'm just like, for some reason, building a new home now in this new reality with Davida feels like it will be really helpful. I just have like such a strong feeling that even if it's hard, and I had dreams of that from the very beginning. Like it wasn't
Really?
me, I want out of this place. It was also like I want to build a new home as this new person, like as a widow, not as I don't want like for some reason that for me felt like really like helpful to imagine.
Yeah.
And even now that everything is so destabilized and I have no idea where that's going to be, and I'm starting to get really nervous about it being somewhere that I'll be really alone and what that'll actually be like. Even still, like when I imagine an actual space that we can set up our way and like hopefully it's a space I feel really good about, I think that's going to feel really good.
Yeah, and I felt very similarly when I moved, and even before of wanting to kind of claim that identity now instead of holding on to Brad and Dana and this pair that everyone knew us as, like, and that I felt very much like a part of.
Yeah.
Um, and knowing that didn't exist anymore and I couldn't have that in the same way, it was like it felt very important. And I remember my therapist at the time, she was like, when you move and when you're in your new space, like be so intentional about the things that bring you, like you, Dana, not like the
Mm,
home just, and there's stuff that of Brad's and, scattered throughout the whole house of things of our life, but it's like really creating this space for you and where you're at now versus the old you that really doesn't exist anymore, this partner you. And for me, that was really healthy and really healing and kind of necessary. And to
yeah,
surround myself, just like to have this space that just felt right for where I was at that point in my life.
totally. Yeah. It's also interesting the numbers for because we asked people for we asked them whether they had moved or not moved,
Mhm.
and it was interesting. So 60% of people had not moved, and 40%, this is of widows, had moved. 40% had moved. But then I was curious because I was like, I wonder of those 40%, or sorry, of the 60% that have not moved, I wonder how many of them plan on moving at some point. Because like this could be people like within the first week
Early.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So it was interesting because then 60% of that 60% said that they did intend to move, but
Mhm.
they hadn't yet, either because it felt too soon or they didn't have the energy yet, but they at one point did plan on moving. So I
Yeah.
thought that was super interesting because I was like, oh wow, that's like a huge percentage of people who are just living in that weird in between zone where eventually you're probably going to move, but you like literally don't have the resources and the energy yet.
Right.
How destabilizing that is, just like living in a home that isn't going to be your home. It's so weird.
Right, right. And then again, all the reasons that you're staying beside, like, again, it's like school systems and support and all of these things of
Yeah.
adding that on. And I know you understand as a mom, like those kind of like, it's not just your life in your home, it's you and your daughter. And it's figuring out all of that for her. And I think a lot of people, especially with older kids, seem to stay. They're like, well, the kids have to get through high school, I don't want to pull them out now because they think about like all the changes their kids have been through and trying
That's a good point.
to keep
Well,
that stable, like
yeah,
whatever you can keep stable.
right, right. And like, yeah, they're your kids' friends, like it's
Their support system.
their support system too. Like yeah, that would be such a different decision. Because even though I have a kid, she wasn't in school yet or even
Yeah.
daycare, and she was still relatively young. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really, really big difference. For me, it's more like she's really close to my family, and
Mhm.
they're a really important part of her life. And so by taking her out of Toronto, I'm taking her away from like, you know, weekly access to my parents and my sister, who she's super close to.
Yeah.
Um, which feels hard too now. She just turned 5, and it's just starting to feel, I can imagine as the kids get older, it just gets more and more and more. Cause I feel like
Yeah.
a big difference now between like her now versus when Brian first died. Like at that time, again, why I should have just done it. But anyways, like I just feel like
let's just beat ourselves up about
I
that.
know. But she was more like an accessory at that
Right.
time, and now she's a little more of like a person with her own opinions. And like I should mention, leaving our apartment was so much harder on her than I was expecting.
Mhm.
She was just shy of 5, so that was her age, and I did not think twice about the impact that leaving that apartment would have on her. Like,
Yeah.
I was just like, "She'll be fine.
Well,
She'll
and
be."
again, especially because of the last year, it's been so up and down, and you guys have been all over the place. I get that. You're like, well, it's just you haven't been here in months, and
Totally. And also, you'll love this. A few months earlier, we were sitting in our apartment at dinner, and I was like, "Oh, Dee, like, I don't know, should we move? I think we should. Like, oh, I'm just having such a hard time deciding when we should do it, but I really think we should." And I was like, "What do you think?" And she was like, "Yeah, of course we're gonna move, Mama." Like, she was just like, "Of course we're gonna move." And I was like, "Where do you want to move?" And she was like, "We just need to be somewhere where we can see the stars and the moon."
oh
And I was like,
my
"Yeah, such
god,
good advice." I
you're like, you're right. You're right, kid.
was like, "Okay, that is like so true.
Mhm,
Maybe that's all we need is just simplify, like we
mhm.
will figure it out. Just like keep it simple." Anyways, I thought it was just funny that
I
she said
love
that.
that.
She knew it wasn't like I know some people, some of my friends who have kids my age, I noticed that they're much more like, "Okay, don't tell the kids anything until the last
Yeah,
second." And like I'm definitely not like that. Like
yeah,
I'm just like, she's known that this is coming. Like we've been talking about it. It's
yeah,
not like a huge surprise. Like we've talked about all the reasons why it's going to be good for us, even though it's going to be really hard. Like she knew that it was coming, but like it was way harder on her than I was
yeah.
anticipating, for sure, for sure, for sure.
And yeah, she probably doesn't fully know how to vocalize what she's feeling. It's just like
Totally.
things came up for you. It's like poor little thing is feeling all the things and not sure why and doesn't know how to say it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a big decision. Like, so did you find it hard when you left? Like the leaving moment. Was that
yeah,
hard?
yes. Yeah, and so leaving the loft for the last time felt really hard. I kind of slowly, so I had my lease and I did it over a couple weeks. I'm trying to remember. Um, like I definitely had a moving truck come. Like I paid for movers because I was not going to do that myself. And had all like my stuff, but I like didn't have anyone coming in and renting the loft like immediately. And since all my sister is in Detroit and my friend, so I was like back and forth a lot in the immediacy. But I remember leaving like for the last time before the renter came in and just like sitting on the floor and drinking a beer and sobbing and just yeah, having a really hard time. And also part of and I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I do want to kind of touch on because I'm curious about packing up Brian's stuff. Like had you done that before or was it like all wrapped up in this? Like had you started doing it? Because for me it was I didn't really do it until I moved out of
Mm.
the loft 2 months or 2 years later.
Like all his stuff was still basically untouched?
Yeah. Like,
Oh,
I think I had maybe, like, gotten rid of some stuff, but it was like, I'm moving and now I have to go through his closet and
oh
get
wow.
rid of all of it.
Wow, that's a
And
lot.
I wanted to wait because I wanted his brother who didn't live in the state and his best friend to come because they offered to come help and I knew they would want some of his stuff and I didn't want to do it alone. And then I was forced to do it because I was like, oh shit, I have to move and I can't wait. And that was just felt impossible. But it was like I don't have a choice, and I think I needed to be forced into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah. What about you?
I had done quite a bit of it. I I don't know. I don't remember when, but like within the first year for sure, there just came a time when I was like, I'm gonna get rid of a bunch of Brian's clothes, and I sent a bunch of them to my friend Megan, who made a quilt out of them, one for me and one for Dee. So a lot of his clothes I was mailing to her, which
Yeah,
felt easier
yeah,
um, than getting rid of them completely. But we did donate a lot, and you know, I kept a bag of clothes. I mean, it was hard, but I do feel like that is an example of something where I was like, I know I have this like weird energy to do this right now, and I have a feeling it's going to get harder.
Yeah.
And I had that like strength and that bravery and that courage, like, you know, that fearlessness. And I was just like, I'm just going to get rid of a bunch of his fucking stuff. I know I have to eventually, so I'm going to do it. And then it was a little bit easier. I was sending the things to Megan, but like, so I got rid of like a bunch of his stuff before, and I gave some stuff to his brother. And like his mom didn't really want anything. Like it was, yeah, I don't know. Brian also didn't have a lot of stuff. Like there really wasn't that much stuff of like he used to joke like, you can look around this apartment and I bet you like 90% of this stuff is yours and 10% is mine. And like, it was true. Like I like things and I like collecting little special things. And he's just like, not like that. Like he just didn't really care about things. So, a lot of it was just sort of like junk. Like he kind of like collected like stupid things that he thought he would use to make something one day. And like, who knows, maybe he would have, but like, it wasn't like super meaningful things.
Yeah.
So it wasn't horrible. And I did it in the beginning. And then, but when we moved, like there were totally things that were still sort of like, I put a bunch of stuff in the basement, and actually there was one day when I kind of like went through everything of his down there, and I just made a few boxes for D of like weird little items of his, like notebooks he'd written music in, and you know, a scarf that kind of like reminds me of him, and whatever, just kind of put everything in boxes for her and pack them up. And but I can imagine that would be really hard to do like in one fell swoop, because you spread out for me a little bit more.
Yeah, and Brad was similar. He didn't have a lot of stuff and like was not interested like in materialistic things at all. So, but it's still like, it felt like, and we had talked about like the toothbrush thing, like even like it all felt so difficult, and like couldn't care less about clothes. And so I gave his suits to a nonprofit that like his friend ran that did like support and interviews for kids out of high school. And so I was like, okay, well, this feels good because at least it's going to support. And he had a lot of books, like a lot of books. I mean, I had them lining the hallway, like in a really long hallway, and would like ask people, like, someone please come take these, like donating his book. And I still regret, and I kept so many, but I was like, I'm never going to read these. Like Brad was so smart and so serious. I was like, I am never going to read the majority of these books, but I would like go through and make sure there weren't notes in them. Like every book would go through and be like, did he underline? Does he have writing in the margins? And would keep it if he did. Cause I was just like, I can't get rid of these.
Yeah.
I think that was like the hardest thing.
I actually haven't gotten rid of Brian's books yet. So I should mention this, that I packed up all his books and they're in storage. So I just have this dream of one day reading all his books and like taking in all his knowledge, like as much as I can.
I was just like, there's no way. Like there were so many, and I was just like, there's no way. And I have some, but I still kept probably more than I should, like a lot. But I also love having books around. And
me too.
Yeah, so that was an easy one, but there were just so many. I was like, I can't. And I was moving to a place that was half the size. I was like, I can't. I don't have anywhere to put these.
Yeah,
the books were everywhere.
Yeah. The books are hard. I bet you I will have to get rid of a bunch, like whenever I'm unpacking wherever I am. I'm assuming I will, but the books were really hard. And like for me, it was more than necessarily like his things. It was more just our life together that really like dismantling that, you know, like that did feel hard. Like just you know, and once things were starting to be dismantled, I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm going. But just like, you know, I kept putting off starting on like the living spaces because I was just like, I want one more night of just like being in our home, you know? And it was like, okay, I have to start. And then once I started, I was like, I can do this. I have to do this. I can do this. And like, it was actually really triggering for me, seeing it empty. Because we had for some reason, the tenant before had moved out really early. So we had like a bunch of weeks before we moved in that it was empty, that we could go and we like painted the whole thing together. And I just have all these really fond memories of Brian and I just like gallivanting around the empty apartment and like eating takeout Thai on the floor of the dining room because there was like nothing there, you know? So seeing it empty, I was like, oh my gosh.
Brought back to all those, like the beginning. All those happy, lovely memories.
Exactly. And like the dreams of what, you know,
what you guys would do in that apartment.
Yeah. And then like how much it did not go as planned and how challenging and painful that is. And I don't know, for me, like I honestly, I could not stay there. Like I actually am so interested to understand widows who do. Like I'm just like, how? Like I can't understand it.
Like, and I imagine like a possibility of going back. And again, because I love that place, but I am curious of the people that stay, and a lot of people that say it had to do with their kids. And then first, is it hard? Like, do you feel like you're making a sacrifice, like your own feelings for the sake of your children by staying, and like just what that feels like? Or if it's just like people truly love the home they created and the space they created together, and it brings them more joy than sadness. And I'm very curious, and I hope that people share, some more experiences with us on that and why they, I know they gave like the little like couple words in the chat box, but I truly just want to know more.
I know, I'm super interested as well. I think it makes a huge difference if you love your home. Like, I should also probably mention that in addition to the things that we've talked about so far, and with my particular apartment, we had a horrendous landlord who treated me she actually told Brian when he was alive that she gave us the apartment because she looked at him and she was like, he looks like he knows how to fix things. And like, he looks like he knows, he looks like the kind of guy who will like take care of the space. And she was right. He did. He did everything himself. And like, we were the easiest, tenants. And then, but like when he died, she was just like so mean to me. And
oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah. So like, that was a big piece of it. Like, maybe if it was a home that I was like, this is our home that we like put so much work into together and it's so meaningful and I don't want to give it up, like maybe that would be different. I don't know. But we each have these like really specific, unique situations, right? That it's all these different factors that I think impact us all in different ways. And
Right. And I think what you said earlier, where it's like, is it practical? Is it emotional? I think for most people, it's probably some combination of all of these things. And it's something that keeps you to stay or propels you to move forward. But we are running out of time. And so, fortunately, I feel like we could just talk forever. But I am just so excited to see, like, you are in such a weird, unique space right now. Like, to just see where you go and how this unfolds for you. You're just in it. You're in it.
Yeah, I know. I'd like every time we record Grief Chats, I'm in a different location.
We'll see the next
one. We'll see. Who knows? I don't even know. Anyways, thanks so much for being here, guys. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. I feel like because you're so fresh in it, like I'm just curious to get your perspective first, because it is like you're still in it.
It's like literally my reality. Yeah.
Right, and that's why we're doing it, I think, because this is real life for you.
Real life.